Good morning, everybody. Good morning. And happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. Welcome in. For those who may not know me, I'm Mark. I am the youth pastor here. So I get the privilege of working with our super awesome, great, and very kind students that we get to have here. And there's a bunch here, which I'm happy to see. So, yeah, we do have a few things going on with the youth group. We have a summer schedule that was changed from the original one. It is normally every week here on Wednesdays. We're doing our summer schedule currently. So if you are somebody who is of youth group age, which means you're going into sixth grade in the fall or you're going to be a senior, you are welcome to start joining us. Starting this Wednesday, actually, is our first event. We're meeting right here this Wednesday at 6:30, and we're going to do a game night. So you are invited to come and hang out with us for that. We'll try to get some video games and board games going and have a good time getting together as we ended our last group one at the end of May. So it's good to looking forward to seeing everybody again this Wednesday. But yeah, it is Father's Day. So again, happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. I made sure to text my dad this morning and got plans for later in the week to hang out and go to a baseball game. So that'll be fun. But it's a day to appreciate the man who raised you. And a lot of times now too, it's expanded to include other men who are maybe are influential, as sometimes people don't have a father in their life, or there's somebody who feels like takes more of that role of their father in their life and makes an impact on them as an individual. A way to appreciate them. I know that I am thankful for my father and the way he raised me. And Dad, if you watch this later, I love you. It's something that it's an important role in a life, and my dad played a great role in bringing me up to be who I am today. And there's other guys too who play kind of like a father-ish role in my life as well, growing up, that have been impactful. One of my friends here, his dad actually was one of my first youth leaders that I connected to, and he continues today to send me Bible verses and encourage me. Like, he doesn't have to do that. I'm way out of high school, not part of the youth group anymore, but he still encourages me, which is super awesome. He's somebody who I think is definitely somebody to look up to and a great example to follow. My youth pastor when I was in high school as well, great guy, always made me feel welcome, even though I was somebody who tried to be on the outside a lot of times and not be somebody who was noticed. Or he always made me feel welcome and was always very kind to me. And that example is something that I try to continue today as I run a youth group, is making sure people feel like they matter and they are welcome. And I mean, just even Pastor Aaron here, he has been a great example to me. He's been so encouraging and kind and very supportive. There can be a lot of people who don't support youth groups. Surprisingly enough, people, and sometimes we kind of, teenagers, we don't really need those people, do we? But Aaron is such a support for the youth group, and that is such a great thing to have as well. And I mean, we meet regularly and discuss life and things going on. And I mean, all these guys, just naming a few, have been impactful people in my life. And something as the youth pastor that I want to do is I want to partner with the parents of these students in building a foundation on Jesus for the students that they send to youth group. That's something that I hope to do. And there's a few verses that kind of bring up this importance of building that foundation on Jesus that go back to some Old Testament things. There's Proverbs 22:6, which says, "Direct your children into the right path, and when they are older, they will not leave it." And then there's Deuteronomy 6:6-9, which is right after the great Shema, which is talking about loving God with all your heart, soul, and strength. And then he says, "And you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I'm giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you are at home and when you're on the road, when you are going to bed and when you're getting up. Tie them to your hands and wear them on your forehead as reminders. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates." So basically, have these foundations everywhere. I mean, repeat them again and again. Talk about them when you're away or at home. Talk about them all the time. When you're going to bed or you're getting up, like it's everywhere. Have it be something that is an example that you are setting all the time. Put people on the right path so that they will not leave it. And that's something that, I want to do as the youth pastor, is help create that foundation built on Jesus. Because those people have been a great example in my life, and I want to keep that going to this next generation. In the Bible, too, there are many references to ways for people to remember God and what he's done in their lives. They put up stones as places of remembrance that you can go to and see the stones, or pillars. We practice the Lord's Supper regularly, which is a remembrance of what Jesus did for us on the cross. They did feasts and the Passover as all these moments where people could have conversations and see things or do things that are ways to remember what God has done and have that foundation that is built. Because, I mean, they didn't have photos that they could take. You can't show a picture of, like, oh, look at this event over here. Jesus feeding the 5,000. Here's the picture of it. There's not video evidence of these things, but there are ways that people can have stories that are told and objects that can be a point of, this is why we have this here. This is why we do this. We just completed our first year as the youth group being central here at New Day. And it's now called P3 Youth Ministry because it's based on this verse, 1 Peter 1:13, which says, "So prepare your minds for action and exercise self-control. Put all your hope in the gracious salvation that will come to you when Jesus Christ is revealed to the world." And it's called P3 because there are 3 P's that we pull from this verse to be kind of the foundation that we work through. The first one is prepare. The second one's prioritize. And the third one is perspective. And with this first year of the youth ministry being here and wanting to set up this foundation, what I felt led by God to do and lead the students through was an overview of the entire Bible. And that's what we did. It was a 31-week journey from Genesis to Revelation. And thank goodness we didn't have any snow days this year, because we've had snow days basically every year before this. And this is the one year we didn't. And I had no extra weeks this year because 31 weeks is a lot of weeks to try to fit everything in. And I didn't have to combine anything, which was really nice because 1 week was already cramped enough to try to cover huge passages of scripture and lots of stories. But we made it. We made it 31 weeks of studying through the Bible in chronological order. Again, it's very much an overview of things. We couldn't get super in depth. But talking about the main people involved, what's going on, the history of the nation of Israel, the foundation that the New Testament is built upon, what's all this. So real quickly, in case you need a refresher, or maybe this is the first time you've ever heard this, I'm going to run through a quick overview, very quick, very glossed over overview of the Bible, just to kind of get you up to speed in what we studied. There's creation in the start, God creating the world. Sin, then entering the world and creating this problem that we have, where we're choosing what's best for us versus listening to God and what he says is best for us. The submission to God versus rebellion pull that's happening. And it's a problem because that separates us from God. Because God is perfect and we are no longer perfect. Ways we can seek approval of others, false gods, seeking our own selfish desires, our own earthly desires. So from there's this sacrifice example that started where an animal dies or something like that. And it's meant to be kind of a payment for forgiveness. And it starts in the Old Testament, and it's a practice that continues onward. But this rebellion continues against God, and it gets so bad that God floods the earth, but God still provides a way out through Noah on the ark. God then establishes a nation that he's going to bless the world with through a guy named Abraham, and he continues to be faithful even in all the evils and failings that come from this people. They eventually end up in Egypt, and they end up being slaves there, but then they get to a point where they're freed and brought out of Egypt. They eventually get to this promised land because, again, they didn't really trust God. It takes a little longer than probably they should have been, but they get there. They establish this land. They take it over. They bring in judges to lead, which judges was a fun thing to talk about because when I first started talking about like an overview of the Bible, I asked the kids if they knew any judges, and no one knew any judges. But we got to talk about judges, and I got to talk about one of my favorite people in the Bible, a guy named Samson, who when I was like 12 or 13, I got to play in a little play for a youth group where I was Samson, and there was this high school older girl who was like pretending to be Delilah and flirt with me, and I'm this like awkward little guy. Like I was tiny. I had to wear a wig at the time. I'm much better suited to play Samson now. Good times. That guy's crazy though. Samson is crazy. He's not a role model, but he's a fun read as you go through and read about the judges. But what's fun about Samson to me too is this character stood out enough to one of our students that he took home his first Bible after hearing about Samson. I thought that was pretty sweet, even though Samson is definitely not somebody I recommend being a role model for your life. He made an impact on somebody. But we talked about the judges, and that eventually leads into the kings, which then leads into a kingdom, but a kingdom that gets divided to a north and a south. And there's lots of evil kings that happen in that time. And eventually, the people of the area are exiled out to Babylon, but God still provides in this time. He provides prophets who can speak God's truth to the people, and eventually they return from Babylon, from their exile, and they return and they rebuild the temple, rebuild the walls, and eventually Jesus comes, and he teaches, and he leads, and he dies on a cross as this final sacrifice for the forgiveness of sins, which then goes and establishes his followers, or the church, to be sent out and go share the good news of Jesus' death for sins with the world, and leading us to awaiting his return, whenever that may be. So that's a base overview of the Bible for you, right there. We're now living in this church age where the last instruction was go be disciples, sharing the good news with everybody and teaching them to obey. So that's where we're at right now in this story. This is what we discussed as the youth group over the last year. 31 weeks again. And discussing that in the idea of that P3 mindset, the prepare, prioritize, and perspective. P for the prepare, because the knowledge of the past is what everything is built upon. There are so many connections from the Old Testament that lead into teachings that add more depth to the New Testament and what happens there. I know when I was growing up, Old Testament seemed irrelevant to me. New Testament's what matters. But I was so far off on that because there's so much in the Old Testament that is essential for understanding the New Testament properly and seeing what was and what things are built upon and how it turns into something new and something even with more color to it in the New Testament is eye-opening. I mean, it's sort of like seeing the last like few pages of a book and be like, okay, I think I got the whole story. I got it. But you miss so much of what happens, what leads to that point of that ending, or watching the end of a movie and you see the plot twist, but you don't understand any of the things that happened earlier in the movie. That preparation of having that foundation, knowing the past and what things are built upon, so you understand things with more depth. That's one reason why we did this 31-week study, is because I wanted the students to have that foundation, to know the basic overview of what is in the Bible, so they can see, like, why is there sacrifices? Why is the shedding of blood going on? Why are all these things happening? So that when we talk about other things going on, like why we do what we do, we have a foundation that we can look back to and be prepared for what we're going forward with. Looking at the promises that God makes, seeing those, seeing the history, seeing what he's done, having something that you can look back to and say, God did this in the past. That knowledge is really important to have as a foundation, because the next step is that prioritizing, putting God first. It's taking that knowledge that we have and putting it into action. Just having knowledge means nothing because we're not doing anything with it. We need to take what we know and live it out, believing that it is something important to do and making it something that we prioritize and set as a first importance in our life, which means making changes to our lives, making decisions to say, I'm going to turn from this thing I know that is bad and turn it into something good. And then living faithfully in that. Not just saying, oh, I want to make this change, lasting a week, and then being done with it and going back to your old ways. Making that change, saying, this is important for me to change this. I will do that. And then sticking with it and being faithful in that change. Prioritizing it. And then the last piece, perspective. Because there are going to be moments that are going to be difficult. It's not going to always be easy. You're not always going to have motivation. There's going to be storms and hardships that are going to come into life and make it so that you want to quit or you want to do something more selfish. You have your own desires that you want to accomplish, and that's what's most important. Pressures of other people. You might feel social pressure from people around you or pressure to please others around you. So when those moments where we struggle to keep going arise, that perspective then is what can help keep us going. And it's built on that preparation and prioritizing to have the right perspective of that hope that we have in Jesus, that when he's revealed to the world, it's all worth it in the end. It's all going to be worth it to keep pushing forward, to keep going, and not quit. To continue to live faithfully when those storms and hardships come. Because we're not going to be exempt from them. That's not something that Jesus promises to us. He never says you'll be free of all hardships in your life. He says he'll be with you, though. He says he's not going to abandon you. So having that hope in our foundation of Jesus, to keep going, to keep living faithfully. This is why we did our study, is we wanted that foundation for our students. I want it for myself. I want it to be something that I keep living out continuously, and I want to be that example in my life for these students. And for others around me too, because I don't just hang around kids all the time. I hang around here, talk to other people too. I got friends. I do. I want to live that example for anybody who might see it. because you can make an influence on so many people around you. There are numerous people that you encounter in a week. You can make choices that can affect things going forward. One thing that really stood out to me in our study of going through the Bible to me was thinking about the people that we're reading about made choices to live faithfully, which led to people later making choices to live faithfully, to more people making choices to live faithfully, on and on and on, till we're sitting here today. Like, there's a line connected to us sitting here that goes back in history to people making faithful choices to live their lives, prioritizing God, being on that foundation, that we're sitting here today. And I thought that was a really cool thought to think about, is all that history led to you sitting here. What's next, though? What role are you going to play, too, to continue that story going forward? We call this lesson Missing Links, partially because we did a game during the youth group called Missing Links, where the students had to find a little picture of that Nintendo character Link from Legend of Zelda, get a candy bar. But also, you can be that missing link that connects the past to the future by continuing to live faithfully daily for God. Being a part of this continued story by living a Christ-centered life so that you can link the past to the future through your choices. And even small choices can have big impacts. It doesn't always have to be like one monumental thing that happens that changes the course of history. Daily choices can be something that has an impact on people. I mean, even just recently, there's a story that happened that I'm kind of looking at and seeing just this flow of events that happened from it and just seeing God working in it. Basically, there's a group of people that Rachel and I connect with online that are across kind of the whole country, even internationally. And one of these individuals mentioned they were looking for like a target practice bow to shoot for archery. But it needed to be left-handed, and they wanted it used because they didn't want to buy a new one. So from what I hear, left-handed bows are semi-rare and harder to find. But what do you know? Me as the youth pastor, we have a student who shoots archery at a competitive level, like very competitive level. So this individual who I hadn't spoken to a ton before this, but we've had interactions. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna reach out to this youth student of mine and say, hey, would you happen to know of anybody who might be selling a left-handed target practice bow in your circles, since you are connected to archery on a larger scale? So she asks around, finds out, yes, I do have somebody who is selling this bow. So I connect the person who was asking for the bow to the seller of the bow, and what do you know? They decide, okay, they're going to sell this to them. Great, awesome. Then this individual who's buying the bow, it is in Stevens Point that they're going to pick up the bow. They're in Michigan, so they're making a road trip over. And they're like, hey, Mark, Rachel, can we stay with you? Can I stay at your house? And I mean, again, this is somebody who I haven't met in person. I'm not really sure about them too much. It's an online friend. Always want to be a little cautious with those types of relationships. But Rachel and I purchased a house, and we're like, okay, I think, yeah, this is a good thing. We should host this person because, I mean, they're a friend of ours. We care about them, and it'll be good to see them. Good to connect with them. So they come over, and they get the bow, and they stay at our house, and we have a great time. They connect with some of our other friends here who are also in this online group. But in that time, I was able to have a conversation with them about my faith. And it didn't go anywhere, which is fine. They just had questions. But I found out that they're also having conversations with other people as well about Jesus. I don't know where that story is going to end. That's where it is now. But I think it's cool to see how God can use small choices of faithfulness, of me saying, okay, I'll help this person who I don't really know a ton to try to find this left-handed bow. Having my youth student say, oh yeah, I'm going to go take the time to go look around for this left-handed bow for my youth pastor, for this random person that they know that I don't know at all. And then, making the choice of let's host them, let's be kind, our friends being kind to this individual as they came in to visit. Small choices can have a major impact on people. And those are just easy choices because I want to prioritize Jesus in my life. I have that foundation that I've built upon, the hope that I have, and wanting to put that into practice. Because it would have been really easy to be like, seeing that post, hey, anybody get a bow? And just scroll past it and forget about it. And none of this would have happened. But to have that mindset of, I want to make daily choices to prioritize Jesus in my life, to live like him, to love those around me, to look for opportunities to show love and kindness like he would to people, to see how I can help those around me. And then choosing to take that step forward, even if it is a little scary, even if it is a little difficult, even though you might feel these pressures to do something different or your own desires to do something different. You don't have the motivation. I'm an introvert and it's hard to get motivated to talk to people sometimes. It happens. But having that mindset of, I'm prepared, I'm going to prioritize God, and I have this perspective because the hope at the end is worth any hardships or struggles that I'm going to go through. So that I can be a continued part of this story, connecting the past into the future by living this Christ-centered life. There can be a lot of ways that you can do that. Look for opportunities this week. We're going to take a moment to reflect a little bit on how we can do that, how we can be that continued part of the story to continue to connect the past going forward to future generations, to people around you, to be those missing links that keep the story going. What can you do this week? So we're going to take a moment to reflect on that and just reflect quietly at the table while we do that. So what we do now is we're going to have a moment of discussion around the tables that you're at, where you can talk to those around you, maybe about what God might be laying in your heart, or a way that you can continue to be part of this story by living a Christ-centered life for the future generations. And yeah, feel free to discuss that with those, or at home if you're doing that with people, or maybe think about somebody you can share that with this week. But we're going to take a moment to do that, and yeah, for this time.